Good evening, friends. Thanks for coming out on a snowy spring evening. Glad to have you here, and welcome to anyone who may also be tuned in on the live stream, which is a sensible way to do it tonight, too. Good to have some friendly faces here. I'm Kathy Reed, director of the Paideia program, and a member of the music department, and proud to be a colleague on the keyboard faculty with Nicholas Shaneyfelt. Dr. Shaneyfelt got his bachelor's in music and computer science at Notre Dame, and his master's in piano and collaborative piano at University of Massachusetts, and his doctorate at the University of Michigan. He came to Luther in a role that was established here by our dear friend and colleague, Jessica Paul, who showed us the value of having on the music faculty a vocal coach and collaborative pianist, which is also the role that Nicholas holds and which he will, I think, be explaining in more detail in his presentation tonight. In this series on collaboration for the common good, I'm so happy to have the music department represented as people who understand collaboration and what we can learn from that in a very special way. So I would like to welcome Nicholas. He will also introduce some collaborators with him. Thank you.
Thank you, and good evening. I'm very thankful to Kathy Reed for making collaboration the keyword of the Paideia Texts and Issues lectures this year. We've already seen 2 examples of faculty engaged in collaborative work with their students in these lectures, and we'll see another one, I believe, next week, correct? 2 weeks from now. So I feel very fortunate to be a part of a campus community that places value and emphasis on the liberal arts, and furthermore, I feel very fortunate to work and live in a town in which musical and artistic expression are alive and well, where they are produced at a high level and where they are consumed by our students and our colleagues and also by members of the community. And I'm happy to see a wonderful cross-section of our department, some members of our community here tonight, sort of representing that population. As Kathy mentioned earlier, there is a very profound understanding of the work of a collaborative pianist that is baked into the culture here. And that's thanks to the work of my colleagues and the groundwork that my predecessor, Jessica Paul, provided before I set foot on this campus. And I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that. It made coming here and coming into this role in 2016 so much more effortless for me. And this was my first academic position from my graduate work, my doctoral work at the University of Michigan. So based on that cultural ethos, you probably know that collaborative pianists get to have their hands in a lot of cookie jars. We are called to play for recitalists, both vocal and instrumental. We're asked to play for opera rehearsals, for musicals, for choral performances, seminar classes, concerto competitions, solo and ensemble competitions. That just happened at the high school this past weekend, for voice lessons, and the list goes on and on and on. And because of these dynamics, we learn to be chameleons of a sort, learning the interpersonal dynamics of each person or group of people that we work with. We learn when to be a leader from the piano, and we learn when to just be barely there, knowing when to interject our expertise, how to convey advice with encouragement, how to motivate, when to provide Kleenex. We build our musical partners up. We encourage them backstage when they forget a word or they forget a phrase. And sometimes we hold their feet to the fire when they need that too. And we hold trusted information and confidence. And so many of you in this room are nodding in agreement or laughing in agreement at this point because you have been impacted by a collaborative pianist in one of these ways, or also because you are a collaborative pianist and have learned these lessons yourself or are learning these lessons yourself. So I apologize in advance if this presentation tells you something that you already know, but I hope it will also reframe your prior knowledge and create new perspectives about what it means to be a collaborative musician. I, too, am still learning more about these aspects. And while I haven't always been explicitly aware of this, tonight I would like to demonstrate some of the ways that the human qualities of empathy, connection, and shared goals are central to my work and central to the work of any collaborative pianist and more broadly, any collaborative musician. And I'd also like to share how my work at Luther College and my gaining experience here has helped me become more aware of my role in shaping character, shaping personality, shaping musical character and personality, and also helping to build community, one collaboration at a time. And in so doing, hopefully contributing to this theme of collaboration for the common good. So if you saw the posters, you probably noticed that I titled this speech the Steinway Philharmonic. And so I just want to give a little background to the explanation of this title. That phrase, the Steinway Philharmonic, is not a phrase for which I can take credit. In fact, it's the title of a chapter in the book of my mentor and professor at the University of Michigan, Martin Katz. And I also believe that Martin cannot take credit for that term, the Steinway Philharmonic. That was a term that was coined by a student, I believe, in one of his studio classes, perhaps very informally, and it was something that really took hold. And I love that term because it suggests that this instrument is a color generator, a generator of timbre and color. And particularly when we as collaborative pianists are called to play repertoire that was originally intended for an orchestra, whether that would be concerto repertoire or operatic repertoire. We have to envision this instrument as much as possible as an orchestra. We have to, and that means we have to know the instrumentation. We have to know when the strings are playing, when the strings are pizzicato, when the brass are playing, or when percussion instruments are playing, perhaps. And this concept of the Steinway Philharmonic, I think, is also very pertinent to solo piano playing as well. If we think about composers like Scriabin, who were obsessed with the idea of color. Scriabin, in fact, invented a color organ as a result of synesthesia. But also composers like Liszt, who were bringing huge, large-scale orchestral works into the salon and arranging orchestral works for piano. So just to illustrate that a little bit, I brought up a small excerpt from the Gershwin Concerto in F, and you'll see why this is important later. But just so you can get an idea of what we may have to accomplish, here's a short clip. So in the span of about 5 seconds, we have to make something that is timpani, bass drum, snare drum, and cymbals make sense on the piano. So that is one realization of the Steinway Philharmonic. Switching gears for just a second, I'd love to talk about when I teach my accompanying class, a classroom class. In one of the first lectures, I love to talk about the concept of collaborative piano, where we've been, where we've come from, where we're going. And I always start those classes. I don't know if I have any pianists who have taken my accompanying class previously. Sophie did, yeah. But one of these videos that I show just give you a little taste of what things were like for collaborative pianists in the past. So here's example number 1. This is Heifetz playing a Brahms Hungarian dance. Pianist is nowhere to be found in this clip, and will not be found ever in this 2.5-minute clip. Okay, moving on. Next clip. This is another violinist, Oistrakh, playing the Chrysler Liebeslied, excuse me. Ably assisted by a pianist, but that pianist is behind some decorative curtain and is never to be found. Now, if my teacher knew I was sharing this clip with you, he would probably be very angry with me, but here we go. Here's another example of something that we have to endure sometimes. So sometimes the music just won't stay on the desk. Okay, we'll move on. We'll move on from that. So all joking aside, and I think that's enough April Fooling for today, especially considering the weather that we're experiencing outside. The first collegiate program in accompanying was established at University of Southern California, USC, in the 1940s by a pianist by the name of Gwendolyn Koldovsky. And the first doctoral degrees in collaborative piano were awarded in 1972. So this idea of collaborative piano is really, in the grand scheme of classical music, quite new and really, I think, still evolving in many ways. In fact, the first person to be awarded a degree in collaborative piano in this country was a professor by the name of Gene Barr, who recently retired from the Eastman School of Music. So another thing I mentioned in my first accompanying class is the term accompanist and how that term has evolved as well. And a lot of us in the room already know the evolution of that. And in fact, we use the terms accompanist and collaborative pianist pretty interchangeably. But I like to think of collaborative pianist as a term that, unlike the term accompanist, suggests that the pianist is on an equal plane with the partners, with their collaborative partners. I have been told, I don't necessarily feel this way myself when I am referred to as an accompanist, but I have been told that the term accompanist has the danger of suggesting a hierarchy in which the pianist is on the bottom rung of the ladder. So I just want to file that idea away because I think that will come back later in this talk. So another one of the questions I wanted to answer or touch on in this lecture was, why do we delineate between what is collaborative and what is not when collaboration is at the heart of so many musical performances? I'm looking at all of the musicians in this room, whether they play piano or not, and everybody in this room is collaborative in nature and has been collaborative in nature at some point. I've often explained that the term collaborative piano was necessary solely because of the amount of repertoire that exists for solo piano alone. I think it would take multiple lifetimes to consume all of the solo piano rep. If you add to that the chamber music repertoire, the operatic repertoire, concertos, instrumental sonatas for strings, woodwinds, and brass, and art song on top of that, then collaborative rep alone will also keep you busy for many lifetimes. So this certainly does not mean that solo pianists cannot also be successful collaborative pianists and vice versa. But I think there is more to the story than just amount of repertoire. Of course, to be a successful collaborative pianist and to be a successful musician, you have to be at the top of your game musically. You have to be able to shape beautiful phrases. You have to be able to think on your feet, play all of the thousands of notes on the page correctly. But as a collaborative pianist, I believe you also have to be a supportive partner, an encouraging, empathetic partner. And so I'd like to, at this moment, re-emphasize the importance of human connection and motivation toward a shared goal. My first paradigm shift in terms of thinking of my role as a collaborative pianist and thinking about what I do came in 2017. After 1 year of college teaching here at Luther, I applied to and was accepted into the NATS intern program, NATS standing for the National Association of Teachers of Singing. This intern program brings, every summer in June, brings voice teachers and collaborative pianists at the beginning of their college teaching career. It brings a select number of those people together to share notes and to learn from master teachers about good teaching techniques. You get to work with students and see each other work with students in sort of a masterclass setting. And at that intern program, I had the opportunity to work with another very popular collaborative pianist named Warren Jones. And the topic came up of the difference between coaching and rehearsing. And I guess I should preface this by saying that Martin, my mentor and the author of this book that I mentioned, and Warren, and myself, we often bill ourselves as vocal coaches. And inherent in that is knowledge and an ease of diction in multiple languages, thinking about text and thinking about interpretation and style in the vocal arts, and working with singers and coaching them through not only those things, but also style, interpretation, and ensemble. So on that difference between coaching and rehearsing, Warren told me, quote, "I never coach somebody I'm going to perform with. I only rehearse with somebody I will be performing with." I had never thought of that before. That was after multiple degrees and a year of teaching here at Luther. So that distinction is now very important to me. And when a student walks into the room to coach with me, there is an inherent student-teacher relationship at play, meaning the student is there to learn something from the teacher. And a transfer of knowledge, we hope, is about to take place, even though we as teachers know that teaching is often just as instructive for us as it is for the student. But rehearsing is a different story. In rehearsing, the exchange of information should go both ways, and we must feel as if we are on an equal plane. I'm here to tell you that that doesn't happen instantaneously, especially when I'm rehearsing with students. A student needs to feel agency in order to feel like an equal partner in the rehearsal. They need to feel like they have power and agency to determine what things they want to work on, what spots in the music they want to isolate, what places they want to prioritize. And I also want them to feel agency in making interpretive choices. And we may try things that don't work, and that's okay. That's part of the rehearsal process. So I have Lonnie Heimgarner, who is a 2024 alumna of the college, to thank for her perception of this situation and for her observation out of which this lecture was really born. Lonnie took collaborative piano lessons with me under the umbrella of vocal coaching, and she also engaged me to accompany her cello recital. After that process of rehearsing and performing her cello recital, she pointed out to me that the dynamic between us in rehearsals was markedly different from the dynamic in lessons. And this is a distinction that I have historically taken for granted, and I think it's chiefly because I switch between those two modes constantly in my work here at Luther. Lonnie found that our musical collaboration transcended the teacher-student hierarchy that is so typical and yet so important to a student's musical development. So if paradigm shift 1 was about Warren Jones informing me about coaching versus rehearsal, paradigm shift 2 for me is about the awareness of the student-teacher dynamic and how to sidestep or work around that dynamic in a musical collaboration via our shared common goal of a performance. I asked Lonnie to explain this a little bit, and I'll just read what she wrote. This is a quote from Lonnie. One of the biggest themes surrounding collaborative piano and collaboration in general is the concept of equality in the partnership. As a collaborative pianist, you are not only responsible for knowledge and preparation of your own part, but also an intricate understanding of the soloist's line as well. That philosophy does not always extend to the soloist as they prepare, but it should. In my experience, knowing how I would approach a piece from either perspective was hugely helpful in my studies of the piece as a whole, and made it easier for me to listen to each line and understand how they interact with one another throughout the piece. Taking on a different role from piano student to soloist shifted the dynamic simply in the sense that it became more equal. In a teacher-student relationship, it is not that there is an unequal power dynamic, but each person is holding a different kind of role toward the same goal, improvement of the student. In collaborating, the performance becomes equally theirs, and each person is working on the performance of their individual parts towards the goal of the same performance. In this way, I did feel like I had more agency over the performance, and that I had the authority to make the decisions regarding the musicality and overall message. Especially with this recital being on my primary instrument, it made it easier to communicate musical ideas. So ideally, it would be great to recreate some sort of mock rehearsal here for you on the stage. But as I was planning this talk, I realized that no matter how hard I try to mock up a rehearsal for you, this setting, which is a performance venue, and the people in this room are never going to make that feel like a rehearsal. They're going to make it feel like some sort of jumbled performance, right? And also combined with our anxiety about trying to be spontaneous and letting our inhibitions go in front of a crowd, it just wouldn't work well. So I had to find some ways to work around that, to show you what I'm getting at here. So I'll go back to, excuse me, I'll go back to one of the very first chapters in Martin's book. Chapter 1 is very much an introductory chapter. And chapter 2, Martin says about his book, if there's one chapter that you read in this book, make it chapter 2, this idea of breath and singing. And I would just say, as a side note, just because the title of the book has the word pianist in it, don't let that deter you, non-pianists, from reading this book. I think there's a lot of really kind of amazing information, and he writes it in a way that is very approachable and I would say fun and enjoyable to read. And he provides a number of musical examples as well. So this first chapter about breathing and singing is really, it's the first thing in the collaborative process. And when I arrived at Michigan in 2013, this was one of the holes in my technique that Martin really worked with me to bring out. This idea of breathing with a collaborator, this idea of breathing and cueing as a second language, a gestural language. Even when your hands are occupied at the keyboard, you still have that ability to breathe and to show somebody what you want in the way that you breathe. This brings to mind also some ideas about control. Collaboration is oftentimes about control, and the question of who is in control. Is the singer in control? Is the instrumentalist in control? Is the pianist in control? How often does that control go back and forth between the parties? Is it possible for both people to have control at the same time? This is one of the things that is kind of fundamental to this chapter about breathing and singing. So many of my first rehearsals with students that I've never met before or worked with before are about building trust, learning to trust each other, and particularly with instrumentalists, though this also happens with singers, I want to learn how they breathe and how they cue and how they gesture. And I want them to take notice of how I breathe and how I cue and how I gesture. This, in my mind, is the first step in giving a musician agency in their performance. Their nonverbal communication, gesture and breath, affirms that they already know what they want and that they know who is in control. Some of the most common places we must rehearse are what I call the seams, like, the seams in your jacket. Places where a handoff occurs between soloist and accompanist, a tempo change, a ritardando, an immediate dynamic or color change. Those are just a few examples. So I'd like to show you one place where a seam, or I'll show you one particular seam that I worked on with a student in a recent collaboration. So I'm going to come to a place, Kyle is going to smile here because this was a place that we worked on many, many times in his rehearsals. This is one of those seams that I'm referring to. So the last two bars on this top system going into this rehearsal 22. So the second piano part represents the orchestra, and the first piano part represents the solo piano part. This is another excerpt from the Gershwin Concerto in F. So you'll see in these last two bars, the orchestra is playing 2 bars of material with a ritardando, and then Kyle is going to introduce new material with a tempo change, but the orchestra has to land the last chord with them. So you can kind of see how this functions like a seam. The orchestra is wrapping up some material, Kyle is beginning new material, and the end and the beginning overlap each other. So how we cue that, how we work together to cue that, is really important. So let's take a look at a clip from very early on in this process, just to see how this went. This was November, late November. So it may be kind of hard to hear or hard to see, but a couple of factors are at play here. One is the timing of the cue. So there's a bit of time where the cue just kind of hangs in the air. You don't want the resulting downbeat of that cue to come, too early from that cue. So timing is one factor. The second factor is the kind of shared affirmation of that cue. So as you look at further clips, notice that I initiate in the orchestra part that something is coming. So I am cueing Kyle that his entrance is about to happen. And he responds in kind with another cue back to me to show me the tempo that he wants. So the onset of our cues is not exactly at the same time, but the arrival of the note on the downbeat is hopefully the thing that's at the same time. So let's take a look at another clip. This is from a rehearsal in February. Better. It's getting better. Yeah. So again, you see how I give my cue first, Kyle responds with his cue, and then we land together. I'm very grateful that he recorded all of these, by the way. This was so nice to be able to share this with you, and I'm also grateful that he was willing to let me share this publicly with everybody. So, because this is, again, this would be very, very hard to recreate in person on stage for everybody. And it's also very vulnerable as well. Okay, so fast forward to the beginning of March. This was just before the concerto competition, and I would say this was probably the peak. This was one of the best months. You hear how things land much more cleanly. Great. This all culminated a week later in the finals, the concerto competition finals. And I'm happy to say that Kyle was one of the winners of the concerto competition. So, yeah. So I asked Kyle to, I asked Kyle to give a little snippet or a synopsis of what he experienced during that process. And this is what he had to say. Most of my cueing experience came from playing clarinet, where the actual motion of giving a cue felt a little more free and natural to me. I had to learn how to better use both my body and eye coordination. And I'm going to paraphrase Kyle here. I had to consider the static space a piano occupies versus a handheld instrument like the clarinet. I was rewriting what you were saying there. This is Kyle again. Additionally, the timing of my gesture in relation to when I strike the key was also a new concept for me. My gesture sometimes did not match the speed of what my hands played, causing the solo and orchestra part to misalign when beginning a new section of the piece. These clips and the end product were a culmination of nearly a year of private practice and months of rehearsals. In that time, I have learned not only to be a better ensemble player, but as a stronger soloist with a better awareness of my body control and coordination. I'm beyond grateful for this learning opportunity and look forward to what comes next. And by the way, Kyle is a nursing major, spending a lot of time in Rochester this year. So, thank you, Kyle. The next topic I want to jump into is a little bit of a tangent, but I hope you'll bear with me, because this is something that's been in the news a lot lately, and I feel like it's something that's going to be with us for a very long time, and it's the concept of AI. Again, I will reiterate that I feel very thankful to be in a career that prioritizes human connection and human emotion. And I think as we continue to watch AI develop and evolve, I think connection and emotion are the things that we need to remember and we need to hold on to. AI is coming close to composing songs that sound pretty darn convincing. My iPad can turn pages when I give it a gesture or wink my eye. But to my knowledge, a computer cannot yet intuit my musical thoughts and cannot yet give a singer or instrumentalist the time that they need to take a quality breath or judge the quality of that breath and adjust the tempo of the phrase accordingly. And because of that, I'm still employed and I'm still employable, and I'm thankful for that. Continuing the tangent, this was in my doom scrolling last week during spring break. Within 10 years, AI will replace many doctors and teachers, according to Bill Gates. And that made me think of a book that he wrote in the mid-'90s, this book called The Road Ahead. And I remember checking this book out from the library as an elementary kid, and not so much for the written content of the book, but more for the interactive CD-ROM that I can play in my computer. But you can actually find the videos that were on that CD-ROM on YouTube, and I watched them a couple nights ago. And his predictions were eerily accurate. If you go back and look at that book from 30 years ago, his predictions about how technology and how the information highway, he called it, which is the internet, how that would impact our lives at home, in school, at work, on the road, etc. So it's very interesting. If you go on archive.org, you can actually read this book in its entirety online, and it's kind of eerily accurate how many predictions he made in 1995 have come to fruition now. So that gives me a little bit of pause when I read an article like this. And actually, in this book, he predicted that our generation, would never see AI reach a point where it was matching human intelligence. And in this article from last week, he's walking that statement back a little bit. So things like that give me pause and make me think, make me hold fast to this idea of human connection and human emotion. So that leads me to, thank you for letting me go on that tangent. But I think it's important to reiterate that collaboration and collaborative work is a way to affirm and to assert our humanity and what we can do do that a machine cannot do. So I guess I'll segue into the next portion of this. So I have a little demonstration, and to help me accomplish this demonstration, I'll ask Julia Weigel to come to the stage. So the pandemic gave us a lot of challenges as a music department, as thinking about education. When students went home and we still wanted to do lessons virtually, we had to find ways to make that work. And one of the ways we accomplished that was with this pretty cool app called Pianist. And a lot of people still use this app. And there are many, many pros to this app. Just to give you a little demonstration of what you're seeing on the screen, this is an app that has an extensive library of songs, mostly vocal rep, as I understand it, that you can download and that you can use to have a piano part to sing along with, whether that's in the practice room or whether that's in your voice lessons. You have features like, if the key doesn't suit you, you can find another key to make it work. You can adjust the tempo via this slider. You can make little notes for yourself. Stop the music in a certain spot if you want to go back and re-isolate that spot. And the beloved fermata button if you want to hold a specific chord and really lock into those pitches. Okay, not yet. Also, you have the ability to play the melody, have the app play your melody to help you learn your pitches. And you can use this slider to dial in whatever blend you want. Do you want some melody? Do you want a little more of the accompaniment? Do you want melody exclusively? All of that is available at one's fingertips. So suddenly, our students have a practice tool at their disposal. They have something that they can use to adjust tempo. They have all of these wonderful, wonderful features. And most importantly, in the event that they do not have access to a live pianist, and in this day and age, that's a hot commodity. That's a hard thing to find. If they don't have access to a live pianist, they can bring something to their voice lessons so their voice teacher doesn't have to be trapped behind the piano. So there are lots of pros to this. Now, Julia has been so kind to agree to sing Richard Strauss's Ich schwebe along with Pianist once. Here we go. Maybe.
Yeah, but still fully on the melody.
Sorry. Oh, thank you. There we go. We'll start over. Thank you. Thanks, Julia. So can I ask you, how did that feel?
Slightly rushed.
Slightly rushed. Okay, great. So I'm disadvantaging App Accompanist a little bit because, admittedly, I'm not pushing any of the buttons for Julia, and I didn't give Julia the ability to push the fermata or to adjust the tempo slider on her own. But in a perfect world, she would have the ability to do that without pushing buttons on a screen, right? And in a perfect world, she would have somebody who is able to read what she's doing, listen to consonants, and place notes with her on vowels. So admittedly, I'm disadvantaging App Accompanist a little bit, but I wanted to do that to make a point, to show some of the cons of this app. For me, the adage, practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent, comes to mind. If I practice with the confines of this app, not anticipating my breathing, and allow it to sabotage this perfectly human necessity to breathe, then I'm setting myself up for the music to proceed in a constant conveyor belt of motion. And if I practice that over and over, I'm cementing it in my mind. It's not unlike a person who practices with a recording and carries the habits of that recording into their own performance, memory by rote. So this brings up the question, who is in control? Again, hearkening back to the first chapter of Martin's book. Who is in control? And how many people have a vested interest in that control? I find it kind of ironic that the name of this app is App Accompanist, not only for the little play on words that's going on there, but also because of the hearkening back to the word accompanist and the hierarchy, the perceived hierarchy that is built into that word. The irony is that with App Accompanist, the hierarchy belongs to the app and doesn't belong to the singer. So I'd like to demonstrate this again. Now I will sit at the piano and we will have a truly collaborative shared goal of this wonderful performance and this wonderful, wonderful song. And as I'm doing that, I will just display the translation of this as you are listening. Actually, if you want to take just a couple of seconds to absorb that translation, I'll get myself set up, and I'm actually going to have you read the score along with me as we perform this. This worked so well earlier. Well, apparently it's not going to behave right now. That's okay. You can follow along with the text, and we'll talk a little bit after.
Shaneyfelt.
it's going to work. So just to point out a couple of places, the musicians in the room, I think, can just immediately appreciate the difference between those two things. And again, I don't want to discredit the usefulness of an app like App Companist. I think that is a wonderful, wonderful tool. Really, I think it's about having the right tool for the right job. Yeah. So if something like App Companist permits a singer or an instrumentalist to walk into a first rehearsal with a person and be more prepared than they would have been otherwise, then that is a perfect tool. But if it gets in the way of flexibility, if it gets in the way of breath, that's when it becomes a bit of a hindrance. So you may have noticed on this last page, for example, a place like this, where Julia has this stunning high A sharp that we want the audience to appreciate and enjoy. So we're going to hang out on a moment like that. Yeah, this music is end of the 19th century Vienna, beginning of 20th century Vienna, where Romanticism is busting wide open. And so we don't want to hear 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We want to hear 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We want to hear whimsy. So again, I know these are things that the musicians in the room already know and already appreciate, but I just want to frame it against the idea and the issues that technology and AI bring into this conversation, which I think are very important and are going to become more and more pertinent as we go forward. What we don't really have time to talk about is this idea of text, right? I mean, those are subsequent chapters in Martin's book, and those are subsequent chapters in my own book of teaching, where we would spend time with the original German. We would spend time with the translation, and that would be another jumping off point for creating shared connection and coming to a common understanding about the music. And I think, Julia, in our performance of that in your recital, we had a lot of that happening as well. So if this were a 2-hour lecture, we might be able to jump into that, but it's not. So I would love to open it up for any questions that you might have at this point. And I think Kathy has a microphone handy.
Just wonderful. All you've talked about. There's one thing that you and I worked with. Is this working?
I think it's for the stream.
Okay.
Yeah.
You and I worked, and maybe other people in the room, with the young musicians of Decora this last weekend.
Yeah.
And I was reminded that part of the process of our learning to listen to the soloist and whoever we're collaborating with, that goes along with the soloist learning to collaborate with us and listen to us and hear what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And for young musicians who's just trying to get around the violin, oh yes, there's it's not just us following them and making their life easier and trying to couch everything in a beautiful musical phrase that breathes, but to have them suddenly listen to us and see what we do with the third of a chord, or it can be so subtle, but it's so beautiful when they all of a sudden they think, oh, it's not just my running after them. I remember one rehearsal that I had with a young girl, and I said, I just want to show you one chord. It was a major 7 chord that just gave me such delight, and I thought that was one isolated instant in the piece where I could show her what was happening underneath her, because I don't think she had the time to do that. But the collaboration works both ways, and it's so beautiful when you see that happen. Our tone affects their tone the same. It's just a total conversation.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
just to add to all these marvelous things that you're talking about.
That's great. Thank you. I mean, this idea of not only shared connection and shared goals, but also shared joy,
Yeah.
right? When you arrive at that goal together and feel the euphoria or the joy, or insert whatever positive adjective you want. And again, I'll just say that to be able to do that in a community, a small community like Decorah, but that has a music program like it does in our high school, it's so wonderful to just kind of slip in and work with students like that who are hungry for that. So yeah, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, you showed. Oh, you want us to use the mic, or those opening couple of pictures of the invisible accompanist
Right.
and then the shadowy accompanist.
Right.
The first PhD is 1972. Were there some pianists, say 50 after the turn of the century, who were famous for doing what
Sure.
collaborative pianists actually now are trained to do?
Sure. One of the people that I failed to mention would be the pianist Gerald Moore. And he, before Martin wrote his book about collaborating, Gerald Moore had multiple books that he was writing about working with singers. And an anecdote that comes to my head is a story that he told about making early recordings, when the microphone technology was very primitive and they all had to be kind of, crammed up against this microphone to make some semblance of quality of recording. So there are plenty of books by Gerald Moore, and I would say that he was one of the first people that kind of helped to to push the field forward.
And
So.
the title of the book, Am I Playing Too Loud?
Am I Playing Too Loud? And
The
the unashamed accompanist. That's right. Yes, exactly. So those are worth checking out, and sort of like Martin's book, I think they're wonderful for anybody, pianist or not, to read. So yeah.
Nicholas, I'm obviously not a musician, although I'm married to one. I was surprised a little bit that collaborators are actually teachers of the vocal performer, and so I'm thinking we have Beth here, other vocal instructors, vocal teachers. What is a relationship like that when you have your student, working with you, and is it ever the case? I mean, are they preparing something with their teacher ahead of time, and
Sure.
then you're also working with them? And is it ever the case, just to put a little cynical edge on it, that the teacher goes, "Well, thank you, Nicholas, for your interesting interpretation with my student"?
That I disagree with.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
what is that relationship between the collaborator and the vocal teacher?
That's a great question, and that's one of those things that I don't even think about anymore because the machine is so well oiled. And so I'm not going to put any of my students in coaching on the spot, but I think any of them would be able to answer that question and also stand up and say that this is the first thing we talk about in my coaching seminar at the beginning of each semester. So this delineation between vocal coach and voice teacher, as a coach, I do not talk about technique. I have no business talking about technique with singers, so I'm not even going to breach that topic. I will leave that for the voice teachers to talk about. Now, can a voice teacher function as a voice coach? Of course, they can coach style, and they have the ability and the experience to coach style and interpretation and language and all of those things out of a singer. So there's certainly some crossover, and there are also pianists who are coaches who will cross that line and give some technical advice, voice technique advice. I'm not one of those people, but there are pianists out there who will do that, some better than others. So in my studio, it's just known that my work with a student as a coach is a supplement to what they receive in their work with their voice teacher. And there may be times where something I tell a student does not align with what their voice teacher has told them. And that's where we come up with a compromise, or we learn to see each other's differences, much like we would have in the rehearsal process.
So differences in interpretation come up?
Of course, yeah, absolutely. You know, there could be 5 or 6 good different ways to do something, or 5 or 6 great places to breathe in a phrase. And there, you know, one may be the best in my mind, but another one may be the best in another person's mind because it satisfies XYZ criteria, and for me it satisfies ABC criteria. So, yeah, this is the dance that we play.
You mentioned doom scrolling about like AI over spring break.
Yes.
If anybody's been on social media for like 5 minutes, they'll know that that's a notoriously bad thing for your mental health. So I'm wondering, how do you, as a musician, find hope for the future? As you know, the news continually seems to highlight that technology is stealing all of our jobs. How do you find hope in spite of all the like negative stuff you're told?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Well, as Kathy mentioned at the beginning of this, when she introduced me, my undergrad degrees were in music and computer science. So I think I kind of come to that with a unique perspective, and I'm always interested in technology and how technology can advance our lives and make our lives more efficient. For me, I just take solace in the fact that again, the shared connection of working with somebody and working toward a shared goal together, and the joy that you feel doing that can, in my mind, never be replaced by a machine. I always want to make music with another human. So for me, you know, if the news is depressing, or if I find myself getting down, I'm gonna put my head in the proverbial sand, and I'm gonna keep finding people to work with that I enjoy working with and that I want to make music with. Yeah.
I've been thinking about the accompanist, and I wonder, I hadn't really thought about this before, but probably people my age and younger have now just grown up as musicians with programs like Finale or digital audio workstations, where you can control the tempo, and usually you set it and it just goes. And I just wonder if that has really affected the way that we deal with printed acoustic music. We look at it and we don't see necessarily the nuance that undoubtedly Strauss had in mind when he wrote it. He just assumed that people would be taking liberties at certain places, right? But now that we're so used to having that MIDI playback that is just relentless, and there's something that can be really riveting about that too.
Right.
There's a lot of minimalist music that's built on that. And
Right.
I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I think that brings up a lot of interesting questions, kind of beyond the scope of this lecture, but interesting questions about musical notation and musical notation and style, right? Because when you look at a score by Strauss or even a score by Mozart, right there, you just move in certain places and you take time in certain places based on what you see and based on what you have, the number of other songs and arias and whatever by those composers that you have kind of absorbed. But I have often thought about that, about composers who sit and compose in Finale and are tweaking how the MIDI playback sounds, but aren't necessarily thinking about how the notation would look if they just printed out a copy and gave it to somebody. So yeah, it's an interesting issue, definitely.
I'm going to suggest that we take the rest of our questions out to this next. And I think Nicholas just has a brief closing before we go, and then we'll have a chance to give him a round of applause.
Sure. Thank you, Kathy. So I just rehearsed with a student this morning, a violinist, for the first time. I had never met this student before as a musician. I've seen this student roaming the hallways, but I didn't really know anything about this student. And the student maybe knew something about me based on hearing me perform or based on what students say about me in the hallway. But we had a nice rehearsal this morning, and I emailed him this afternoon, and I just said, would you just write a few words about what you thought and how you thought about that rehearsal? And I kind of prompted him with what the content of this talk tonight was going to be. And I just so appreciated what he wrote, not as a rah-rah Nicholas, but as a just like rah-rah collab piano and rah-rah collaboration. So I'm just going to read this. This is him talking. I recognize the difference in the dynamic between a rehearsal and a coaching session and the unique situation of two musicians working together for the first time. To that end, today's rehearsal started off with pleasantries about spring break, but we quickly jumped into a run-through. I think those are both valuable ways to start a new collaboration. You have to get to know your collaborator as a human, but you also have to get to know their musicianship. I think it went so well today because of the way that you balanced the role of professor and collaborator. I'm very aware that your experience dwarfs mine, so I was happy when you had recommendations for how to rehearse or phrase something. However, I also felt appreciated as a musician with a vision and my own more limited experience. Another thing that perhaps improves any dynamic is high level of skill and or preparation. I can imagine how different rehearsal would have been had you or I not been adequately prepared. Finally, it just occurred to me that the difference in our instruments also plays a role. We discussed similar articulations on different instruments, which creates a conversation as opposed to a lesson. If he wrote that in 10 minutes, I'm just so impressed and so happy that it worked out that way. And if I can contribute to community, and if we can all contribute to community in that way, one musician at a time, then I think we're doing okay. So I'll leave it at that. And thank you all for coming. Thank you.